Folks on Zoom, we're going to get started in just a second. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to take the moment to encourage you all, if you haven't, to silence your cell phones. And let me introduce myself. My name is Ori Tsamarit. I'm the Programming and Education Director here at Tucson Jewish Museum and Holocaust Center. Just a little bit of quick housekeeping. Bathrooms are in the entrance hall to the right. If for whatever reason we need to evacuate out of here, it's through the glass doors here on the other side of me, on the other side of this wall, and out back. And please help yourselves to water or snacks as needed. Yeah, so in a second here, I'm gonna turn it over to a very wonderful member of our Jewish community here in Tucson. So Sue Neuhauser, daughter of Holocaust survivors, and a really again, wonderful part of our Tucson Jewish community. And if I play my cards right, possibly a future docent at this museum as well. Yeah, for folks on Zoom, if you have any issues at all, I have some wonderful colleagues who are going to be monitoring it the whole time. So we'll try to troubleshoot as much as we can. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sue Neuhauser.
Wow. Well, hi to everyone who's on Zoom. I can't see you, but I can feel you. I can feel your presence. And I can certainly feel everybody here. Thank you all for coming. I hope you find my talk interesting. My journey started. Hello, hello, hello. I have to talk louder. Okay. My journey, this little journey, I mean, my journey started in 1948, but this little journey here started in about 2018 when I happened to see just a little line in an article that said that the Austrian government was going to be considering citizenship for people that had been driven out basically during the Holocaust. So those people that were still lucky enough to be alive. Can you hear me? Well, Um, and I said, oh my gosh. So I don't know what drove me to start the process, but I did. And for some reason, I thought this is going to be easy because on both sides of my family, there's a survivor family and et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't easy. It took me 3 years. And I'm going to point out a few things about my talk. I'm just going to do a little quick review about what we're going to cover. And these three photos here represent the three parts of the talk. This first part here, this first photo is me in LA at the Austrian embassy being given my citizenship papers, okay, which took me 3 years because of a lot of complications that I'm not going to go into with my birth certificate and having to be fingerprinted on three separate occasions by the FBI and just a lot of stuff. But for some reason, I was just like a pit bull about this thing. I mean, I was like, once I started, I was like, I want to do this. I really want to do this. So, and the second photo there is actually a grave in the Central Friedhof of Vienna, the Central Cemetery, which is huge. You can spend a whole day there. It is amazing. Mozart's grave is there. Um, um, who did the waltzes? I forget, but Strauss. Strauss's grave is there. They have all the famous people there. My family's in the not so famous section, and you could barely make it out. But this was kind of a very serendipitous thing that happened. Only about 3 weeks before I was ready to leave for Vienna, I found out, I went online. I said, what the heck? I've been trying for years to find some family graves, and I'm going to give it one more try. Well, now there's an online volunteer organization called findagrave.com. And I had written to all these cemeteries, came up blank, nothing. I go to findagrave.com, and it turns out that some volunteer on the other side of the world has found this grave, my family grave, for me. So there's the grave. And then the third part is the actual, what they call a Stolperstein, which means stumbling stone in German. And that is one of the two that I laid as in the ceremonies that I had started. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this. I don't know exactly how much time it's going to take, and I will try to take some questions, but I'm also going to hang out here afterwards. If people want to know more information, I'd be happy to share it and share my phone number with you. Okay. So here I am with one of the council staff, and there's a Bescheid, which is a citizenship paper, and it's signed by the president of Austria, whatever. And that is what, and my European passport. So I now have a European passport. And there are Austrian consulates all over the United States. The closest one is the Western region is in LA. Okay, so here we are, made it to Austria, and did a little bit of sightseeing. I rented a beautiful place. I spent a little over a month there in total. And I had to put at least one photo with food in it because incredible. The food is just incredible. That's all I can say. I mean, the food's okay here, but for some reason it tasted better there, and everything seemed fresher. And this is a goulash. Vienna has a very strong Hungarian influence, and the Hungarian dishes are on Austrian menus. Austria was part of a larger region called Galicia before the war. And Galicia included a lot of countries that have their own boundaries now. Hungary, it was the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, it was called. So here we are in St. Stephen's Plaza, which is a big plaza. There I am having a great lunch. The third photo is, it's a, what do they call that? I don't know in German, but it was one of two very large things left over from World War II. And the thing that really impresses you the most when you go and almost any large city in Europe is there is a viable feeling of history that we don't have here about World War II. And you see a lot of things that were left. They didn't tear everything down. They just left things so people would remember. And these two, this is, believe it or not, is I believe it's 12 stories high. It's just huge, and it is a Flakturm. That's right. That's the German. And Flakturm. It's a flak tower, and that is where the Germans would try to shoot down the Allied planes from the top of that tower. And there are 6 still standing in Vienna. And as you can see here, it's in the middle of a very bucolic, beautiful city park. But those things are there as stark reminders that this was your history, and don't forget it. Unfortunately, politically, some people in that part of the world seem to be forgetting it right now, but that's another subject. Again, another example is right here. That is, it says niemals vergessen, never forget. Here stands the headquarters of the Gestapo. And guess where that is? That is right next to the main bus transfer terminal in Vienna, right in the middle of the city. So that is where people were taken and tortured and imprisoned by the Gestapo. And it's right there. Again, never forget. Here is the Central Cemetery, Zentralfriedhof of Vienna. And here's the exact, I took a screenshot of when I found my family grave on this findagrave.com. Okay, there it is. And just to pay back, by the way, I went and found a grave for somebody else over at the cemetery over here on Oracle Road. So they want me to do more, but I'm not sure I have time. So as you can see, my name is Neuhauser and Joseph. Those are my great grandparents. They were lucky to have both died before World War II. One in 1912, one in 1917. Here it is. They're not, once you get to the cemetery, it's not easy to find because it's huge. The cemetery is just huge. And that's myself and my sister. I had rented an Airbnb apartment right across from that giant park where you saw the flak towers that I showed you. And I was there for about 2 weeks. And then my sister came, and then her daughter came, and then we have one living relative, Michi, who is in Graz. She's in her 50s. She's like a third cousin or a second cousin to me. And her grandfather came back to Vienna, set up a business, and never left after the war. I don't know how much storytelling I should go into because I have to keep an eye on the time, and I don't even have the time. Can't keep an eye on. So we had a good sampling of people, friends and relatives. We had people. We had some staff people from the different NGOs, government people, came to the ceremonies. Let's see, let's go to the next one. Let's see. Okay. So I'm gonna start by talking about two sides of the family. My mother, who was the tippy top on the left there, in the nurse's outfit, very tippy top on the wall. She's on the wall over there. Yeah, very tippy top on the wall. That was her name was Selma Neuhauser. Her maiden name was Fuchsdijk. So this is Samuel and Liebe Fuchsdijk. And here's my mother here. Okay. That is the only picture of her as a child I've ever seen. That's the only one she took with her when she escaped on a kinder transport. Okay. Her parents died. So I never met my grandparents. So my goal when I contacted the organizations that work with the Stolpersteine in Vienna was to honor two sides of the family, my mother's side and my father's side. So this is my mother's side. That was the passport. That's the last known photos of them. That's their passport photos. And there are two organizations that organized Stolpersteine in Austria, Steine der Erinnerung and Steine des Gedenkens. And I went with Steine des Gedenkens because the guy started communicating with me right away. His name was Thomas Breath. And again, this is a process that you have to go through. You have to provide a lot of information to them before they'll even take you on as a client to prove pictures of the people, to prove when they died, where they died, everything. So this is that's a picture in the lower right of the family prior to the war, and then that's a picture of my great grandparents. Okay, so this is where we did the first ceremony. We did two ceremonies in one day. This was the first ceremony. And if you look on the right, that is the thing that I had commissioned. You have a commission, they take it to a foundry, they have a brass plaque fashioned with whatever words you want to say. It says, and they all start the same on the top. They show the years of the war, 38 to 45. As Jews and Jewesses, they were persecuted, robbed, and killed. Verfolgt, beraubt, and ermordet. And that's in memory of, zum Gedenken an, Samuel Fuchsdijk and Liebe Fuchsdijk, the two people I showed you. Beide deportiert nach Theresienstadt. Both were deported to Theresienstadt in 1942. Und weiter nach Auschwitz 1944 und dort ermordet. So, and further in 44, they were taken from Theresienstadt to Auschwitz and murdered there. This is the small group that actually went to, and these stones are placed at the last known address of the families. Okay, now it's very confusing when you're looking up the records for last known address. If you don't somehow know that through your own family history, because the Nazis had things called Sammlungswohnungen, okay? And that literally means collection apartments. So they would confiscate big apartments from wealthy people and gather Sammlung, gather all the Jews in the neighborhood and put them all into that one apartment. And sometimes that's what comes up on the record where they were taken from. The Sammlungswohnungen, that is, instead of their actual home. Okay. I don't know how I found out, but I figured out both actual addresses, both actual addresses. So here we are in it's actually a Arabic, turned into an Arabic Turkish neighborhood. You can see it's a busy street behind us. It's a very lower middle class kind of building. We are at the door of the actual address where where my murdered grandparents last lived. Here's my niece. This is Michi, the girl that stayed in Graz, friend. This is a gal who moved back to Vienna, and myself and my sister. And Thomas Breath from the organization was also there. We gave a little speech. It was very low key. And my sister, I'll say a word about my sister, Carol. My sister is 6 years younger than I am. I grew up speaking German, listening to Viennese music, eating Viennese food, and wondering, why my American Jewish classmates were so different than I was. They seemed so carefree, happy and carefree, and I was not happy and carefree. And I couldn't figure it out till later in life why I was not as happy and carefree as they were. My sister, 6 years younger than me, did not grow up speaking German. She didn't have the same acculturation that I did. And she didn't feel as strongly about the Holocaust and about family history as I did until we did this. And that night, when we went back to our Airbnb, she woke up the next morning and she said to me, I had trouble sleeping because this is the first time when we went to the actual apartment that I envisioned my grandparents being hauled out by men with guns. And that was the first time she actually viscerally felt the trauma that all of these people have gone through. Okay, so that was the first ceremony. That was for the Fußsteig / Neuhauser. Now we're going to the other side of the family, which we had a much bigger event for them. And that was, this is my aunt, Frida Neuhauser, and that is from 1912, that playbill right there. The trouble with Viennese Jews is that they didn't know they were Jews. Okay? They literally, they had some vague idea, and they were registered with the Israeli Gemeinschaft. Incidentally, by the way, that was one of the ways, unfortunately, that Jews were all able to be identified during the war. Because in the old days in Europe, everybody registered their religion at birth. Okay? So all they had to do was look up the records and find out you were a Jew. It didn't matter if you never went to synagogue in your life. Didn't matter if you yourself didn't even know sometimes, right? So, unfortunately, my Tante Frida and that part of the family, they were totally acculturated had no idea what was about to hit them. Um, so this is Aunt Frida and Uncle Carl, both of whom I knew growing up in Chicago. As far as I knew, they had no children. They never talked about it, nothing. Well, it turns out not only did they have two children, but one of them was a war hero. And I never found out about it until I had to do my own research. And this is I'm going to do a little intro, short film talking about the Dutch underground. And after you see this little film, you'll see the connection with my family and the man who I later learned was a war hero. Take about 4 minutes long or something.
For Auschwitz on the 3rd of September, 1944. During these 2 years, the Germans and their Dutch collaborators deported some 107,000 Jews, mostly to Auschwitz and Sobibor, where they were murdered. Only 5,200 survived. In addition, 25 to 30,000 Jews went into hiding, assisted by the Dutch underground, and 2/3 of those managed to survive. During the war, the Oversteger family hid a Jewish couple in their home. One of the biggest impacts on the Dutch people during the occupation was caused by the German Arbeitseinsatz, or labor deployment, which forced every man aged between 18 and 45 to work in German factories. As part of this program, approximately 500,000 Dutchmen were transported by force to Germany. Life in the factories was hard and dangerous too, as the buildings were regularly bombed by the Allies. Those that refused to go were forced into hiding. Freddie and her sister played a crucial role in distributing anti-Nazi propaganda, spreading leaflets, and pasting warnings to discourage Dutchmen from working in Germany. Their efforts were aimed to disrupt the German war machine and undermine the occupiers' control. Their messages read, "Don't go to Germany," or "For every Dutch man working in Germany, a German man will go to the front." The Oversteger sisters were the only 2 women in the 7-person underground cell of the Harlem Council of Resistance. Freddie later recalled that at the beginning of her time with the Resistance, she thought that they would be starting a kind of secret army. Very soon, however, the girls were doing much more than just handing out and distributing leaflets and literature. They would be shown how to fire a weapon, the basics of sabotage, or picking up tricks on how to rig railways and bridges with dynamite so travel paths could be cut off. This resistance's counterintelligence, domestic sabotage, and communications networks helped to provide key support to Allied forces throughout the liberation of Holland. Members of the resistance, if discovered, were immediately sentenced to death. With her hair in braids, Freddie looked like a 12-year-old schoolgirl, and her innocent looks made her invaluable as she could slip by the Nazi controls unnoticed. Few soldiers
I'm sorry. Carl Gerger was the son of my tante, my aunt Frida. And you may be wondering why he's standing there in a German uniform. They were so in denial about being Jews that my aunt had her son and daughter immediately baptized when they were born, hoping that they would be registered as Christian and not have any problems, because Jews had problems way before the World War II started, before the actual beginning of the war. I mean, Jews were denied employment in places, they were denigrated in other places. So Carl grew up with Lederhosen, or later, I have pictures of him in Lederhosen. He was a real good Austrian boy. And there he is in Holland. And the reason he's in Holland is because when he reached enrollment age in the military, his my aunt and my uncle pulled strings to get him out of Austria and had him stationed in Amsterdam. They figured he'd be safe because they had their little secret, and their little secret was, guess what? We're full-blooded Jews. We're full-blooded Jews, not Michelin, not half Jews. We're full-blooded, and our son is, you know, going as a German officer. So, what happened, of course, was you saw that little film that there was an underground resistance cell in Amsterdam, and it had those two women, and they showed how they're putting the dynamite, the plastic dynamite on the railroad tracks. And evidently there were 12 main male members of that underground cell, several women, and then some auxiliary people that were helping on the side. Because my cousin Carl Jr. was in the military, he was the only one that knew how to use guns and munitions, because these folks were like us. There were professors, there were artists, there were lawyers. They didn't know from guns, right? They didn't know about how to plant a bomb, or so he was a member of that underground cell who instructed them how to use weapons and how to get weapons, where you could find weapons. So they planned a huge sabotage act and carried it out. And the act that they carried out was to tailor police uniforms, Dutch police uniforms, and go disguised as Dutch police to the main train station, where they just happened to have all the records of all the Jewish people where they live in Amsterdam. Okay. And they blew it up. They blew up the whole train station. Okay. Then they had to go into hiding, really quick, because that was really, terrible. So anyway, long story short, they found them all. They put them all in prison. I have all his last letters from prison. And as they were trying to mount appeals in the court for some kind of clemency, which they weren't going to get, they went all the way to Goebbels. They took it all the way up to Goebbels. They were all denied. And one morning, early in the morning, they marched them out and executed all of them in the countryside in Holland. And this is a Dutch newspaper, from a Dutch newspaper. These were all the young men that were executed together. So, for Carl Jr., who's never gotten any kind of recognition, I mean, he died anonymously. Essentially, he was murdered by a firing squad. Doesn't have the recognition of a Schindler, or other people. But there were many, many heroic acts during World War II that have yet to be recognized by us. And since he was, a family member, I'm bringing his story to light to some degree, small degree. But I'm going to show us a small snippet of the ceremony that we did in the front, also in the front of his last known address. Before, can we turn it up? So, this is positive to Carl Durga, the youngest. Und Karl war den Sohn von meiner Großtante, Rita Neuhauser. So Karl Berger, born 1918 in Vienna. I have long wanted to honor young Karl. He died at age 27, much too early, much too early. He gave his life too soon, and a memorial plaque in front of his former home, which is Stolpersteins, seemed like a perfect way to honor him. So I worked on this a very long time. Karl Berger was my father's cousin. Oh, the original video is quite a bit longer. I gave a long speech. The council, like the city council person was there, gave a long speech. The guy from the Stolpersteiner organization gave a speech. So we all talked a little bit. So it was much bigger. The next thing you'll see that there was more people, and I hired musicians. I hired some musicians to do a public musical thing, and it's right on a busy corner, right next to this incredible bakery that has pistachio cream rolls that you cannot buy anywhere in this country, as far as I can tell. And I was there every morning. I can tell you that right now. It was very close to it turned out, oddly enough, that his last known address, which was 22 Jagerstrasse, was only 4 blocks from where I had rented my Airbnb apartment. It was just really incredible. And of course, it's funny because the people that do these ceremonies are all volunteers. You know, Steine, Denkens, all the people that are helping you out to place these things are all volunteers. And none of them are Jewish. You know, they're all Christians. Righteous Gentiles, right? So it's funny because I had to like straighten this guy out on a couple of things, which amazed me. Because they've done several of these ceremonies. I think he told me they were going to, in this year alone, they were doing 7. So about 1 every 2 months, because it takes a long time to plan and this and that and the other. So he says, well, what kind of music would you like? Because I have these wonderful musicians and they can play just about anything you want. And he says they can play, they do klezmer really good. Okay. And they can do all this, Yiddish music. My family never spoke Yiddish. They didn't know Yiddish. So I said, my Aunt Frida, when I went to her house, she would listen to Viennese music. Schubert, Mozart, you name it. They don't know from klezmer, my family. So I instructed them. So we got a nice playlist together, and the playlist was it ended up just being good Viennese music. And they even came up with music composed by some composers that had died in the Shoah themselves, which I thought was, very sensitive of them to do that. So I'm going to probably wrap it up with this next part. And I think Lori wants to say a few words. And I will hang around. Lori, should I do Q&A after or before? Okay, well, let me do the very last slide. And this is the very last slide. Oh, wait, this is the next to the last slide. Sorry. So this is a shot of the Stolperstein that we did for Karl Berger. And the first two lines are, oh, that's much better. I like this much better. The first two lines were the standard that they always put. And it says, in memory of Karl Berger, who was a medicine student. He actually graduated and was a doctor already at the point he was murdered. He was born 1918. He's the son of Karl Anton Gregor and Frieda born Neuhauser, maiden name Neuhauser. As a soldier in the Wehrmacht in Holland, he was there murdered, not murdered, executed by the Gestapo due to his resistance activities. And that's what and I, I'm the one that came up with the wording. You can put whatever you want, as long as it can fit on the thing. Okay, so that's in the ground, in the sidewalk right now in front of where he last.
Thank you. If folks,
So sorry. Is this working? Yeah. Is this working? Okay. Question was, what is the climate in Austria right now toward Jews? Right? Generally speaking, you still have a majority that carry a certain amount of responsibility and admit that there's a responsibility of the nation toward what was done in their name, not necessarily this generation or their relatives, but what was done in the name of that country. And you also have a rising right-wing component. And in fact, one of the shots in the beginning where there was a plaza, St. Stephen's Plaza, when we were at the Jewish Museum, which is heavily guarded, we have guards walking back and forth with arms, Austrian, provided by the Austrian government. There was a couple there who said they were leaving the next day. They had planned to stay for several weeks and they were leaving the following day. Why were they leaving? Because they had walked in on a Nazi rally in that plaza and they were scared. I didn't see the rally, luckily. So I think it's, keep your antenna up. That's all. That's what I say.
Sue, I have a question from Zoom really quickly.
Yeah.
Someone was wondering in what district in Vienna you had placed the stones, the two that you had mentioned. Yeah, and then after this, folks, I will pass a mic around.
You know, that is a great, great question. And I'm not sure I have it right. I think it's the third, I think it was the third district. There's a group called the Simon Wiesenthal International Group, something, Swiggy. If you go to their website, they have maps. Everybody is mapped out. You click on an address or a section in the city. It will tell you if there's a Stolperstein there. It will tell you if somebody lived there. It will give you the history of the person and the family that lived there. I was hoping we could make that a final slide, but we didn't have time to get it in on time. But it's SWIGGI. It's very easy to find. I can help you if you need help. Well, the question I just answered was what?
Thank you very much for your talk. My question is about when you were applying for the Stolpersteine and you said you had to have all of this information, including the place of death. Does that mean that for all of the millions of people who died, that their families may not know the place of death? They wouldn't be eligible to apply for Stolpersteine even if they knew their last address, but you know, they went into parts unknown and were never heard from again?
I am not really qualified. I'll repeat the question if I can summarize. The question is, in order to get a Stolperstein placed, do you need to be, you have to be able to prove the place of death? Does that sum it up? Okay. My understanding is that, for instance, I was able to go to the Israelitische Kultusgemeinde, which is the Israeli cultural attaché in Vienna itself, or if you go to any city, there should be a cultural attaché, Israeli, and they have amazing records, and you could even maybe get it from Yad Vashem. If you can't prove where your relatives were murdered, at least if you can have a proof of deportation or removal from their last known address. You have to have some kind of paper trail, some documentation to prove what you're saying, what you're claiming. And I think they're pretty generous in terms of what they will accept.
Israelitische Kultusgemeinschaft is what the Jewish communities were called. It doesn't have anything to do with Israel. And if people cannot find out where people were murdered, it is said stolen or lost. And they will be eligible for it. Maybe.
So did everybody hear that? Okay.
Why did so many Austrian Jews abandon their religion when they were living in Austria before World War II?
The question is, and I don't know if I'm qualified to answer it, but the question is, why did so many Austrian Jews abandon their religion before World War II? I'll take a crack at it. Let's see. I'll talk about my Tante Frida. I'll bring it back to my own family, okay? My Tante Frida was born into an already secular Hungarian Jewish Austrian family, okay? She was an extremely talented woman. She was an artist, she could paint, and she trained as an opera singer. Okay. She knew, and I don't know how she knew, but she knew that she would never get a place in the Vienna Staatsoper, in the big opera house in Vienna. She would not get in. In 1918, when she was 18 years old, she had herself baptized. I think the reasons for not adhering to the religion per se were in many cases economic and due to discrimination by the general social milieu.
What you might want to have as part of something here, in addition perhaps to mention what happened in Serbia during Bill Clinton's administration, where he did make a difference, is you might have something here.
Sir, I'm sorry. Sue has nothing to do with what's on exhibit here at the museum. Sue's yeah, so we can definitely talk about that, but please, folks, keep the questions relevant to the talk. And please use the microphone. It's not for the folks who are here in the room. It's for the folks joining us by Zoom. They can't hear it otherwise. So please go ahead if you had a question.
We have a few questions from Zoom right now. Just give me one sec. So, Sue, somebody's asking, or rather mentioning the discomfort that some people have whenever they step on the stones, and they were asking if that issue came up during these several processes that you went through.
Well, the question is there a discomfort about stepping on the stones?
Yes, yeah.
I think the purpose, they call them Stolpersteins, which means Stolper means stumbling. So you don't want to be stumbling. So you don't really want to be stepping on those stones. I mean, I'm sure they're not guarded. No one's guarding them. If people want to step on them, if their dogs want to pee on them, there's no way to stop any of that happening. But I think generally speaking, people are respectful if they know that there's a Stolperstein in the ground.
And there was one other one briefly as well. Somebody was asking if you could share the names of the stone makers. If you could share the names of the stone makers for the Stolpersteinen.
The question is, can we show the names of the stone makers?
Yeah.
The stone makers. The actual stone makers are a foundry that contracts with the two organizations that arrange with you, with your participation, which is Steine der Erinnerung or Steine des Gedenkens. And they each have a website. So whoever you feel comfortable working with, if you or anyone on Zoom is interested in going through this process, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. That's about it. So, sorry. Oh, one more.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment. Thank you, Sue. It's pretty amazing. Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, it's wonderful to see Laura up there. I officiated her bat mitzvah, your niece. So one of the things I wanted to just make a comment for anyone who's interested in these Stolpersteins were started by a non-Jewish German artist. It's been at least 20 years. And the reason why they're called Stolpersteins is so if you aren't paying attention, you can trip. And the idea is to trip you up and to make you go into memory. And I think that's what's very significant about them. And when he started doing it, he didn't have Sue or any other families coming and saying, make a memory for my family. He started doing it because he was a German and he wanted to figure out how are we going to remember people. And he just started making them. You know, ironically, you can go now on the great purveyor of information, Instagram, and you can look, there's Stolperstein. They have a Stolperstein Instagram account and they publish people's names where they are and if they have a picture. So it really is, it was one of the original ways that a German person felt, how can I sort of make up for what happened, as it were, and it is for memory. It is also controversial, as the person I think on Zoom is recognizing, that a lot of survivors are like, well, why are our names on the ground? You know, like this isn't right. They shouldn't be on the ground. They should be elevated. And that is, so that's the controversy about it, you know, but in a way it's sort of like graves are on the ground also, you know, and so that, but I think it's a really strong way of making people pay attention.
Okay, there are 2 points that you made that I'd like to respond to, and I'm going to quickly reiterate. The first point that Rabbi Stephanie Aaron made is that these stones are somewhat elevated. The Stolpersteiner, they're meant to stumble on. Those were only the original stones by an artist named Gunther Demnig, who does beautiful work. They do not allow those to be done in Vienna because these other 2 organizations are doing them in Vienna. Other places are different. As you see, these are level with the sidewalk. These are level. These are not, you don't actually stumble on them. That was the first point. The second point was that some survivors asked why these stones are in the ground. They maybe feel somewhat denigrated by that they should be put higher. My understanding is that because they are in the ground, because that is public space, that the city or the municipality, the township can grant the permission to put these memorials. Whereas if you're in a privately owned building, they might deny that permission. You know, so it's a matter of you get what you can. You get what you can. No. I'm just repeating your comment about some survivors feeling uncomfortable that they're in the ground, and there are practical reasons why they're making them that way.
Okay, we're going to take one more question.
Are these just in Austria? I mean, where are these found in Europe, and how many are there? How many are there?
How many Stolpersteins? I can't tell you how many there are. Probably a little bit of research would tell you. 95,000. Someone said 95,000. I can tell you about Vienna. Vienna lost 40,000 Jews who were murdered. At one point, Vienna's population was about a quarter Jewish. Okay. They lost 40,000 Jewish people. There are only about maybe 1,500 actual memorials like this that people have gone through the process to have done, because the city's not doing it, the world's not doing it for you. You got to do it for yourself.
So thank you so very much, Sue. I'll let Sue promise she'd stick around and she'll answer a few more questions at the end. And I just want to remind everybody that in this space, at the Tucson Jewish Museum and Holocaust Center, everything we do in this space is through the eyes of either the 270 Holocaust survivors who came and made Southern Arizona their home, or if you happen to be next door in the synagogue, it's through the eyes of Jews here in Southern Arizona. That is how we look at this space. So having Sue come here and share such an intimate family history with us is just so powerful. These are the things that we want to make sure that we're elevating and that we're taking a moment. So not just in Austria, not just in Vienna, we want to make sure that we're taking a moment to stumble over those stones and to stop here and to just think about this, not just from the bigger picture, but also just from Sue's family story, hearing how her sister reacted, all of these things. These are the intimate histories that are so very important to us here at the museum. And we thank you all very much for joining us. We have brochures up at the front that have all the other events coming up that we have. Our most pressing event, I guess I would say, is Purim. It will be our Pioneer Purim Ball is next Saturday. We still have a few tickets left. If you would like to join us, it is going to be a heck of a lot of fun. Boots and hats are encouraged. So Sue, thank you again for your time. Thank you to everybody on Zoom. Appreciate you.